ask me, like, what is my generation, quote unquote, I don't really know how to respond to people because reality is like, I'm not really technically Gen Z. I'm born 99. You know, maybe I was like born like 97, 98, 99.
You
Like you're
no,
kind
you're
of,
Gen Z. You're Gen Z. I'm
yeah,
Gen
but I'm
Z.
kind of not because it's weird when
You don't feel it.
when I meet people my age, we're kind of like early Gen Z in the sense where we were kind of still raised with very much of like the 90s intention, but then
Yeah,
that progression changed as like we hit the 2010s. So it is like a weird place to be like, what generation are you if you're in that weird bubble?
yeah. I feel you. I'm right on the cusp too. So I was raised. My brother is a millennial, but I was raised more like him. So I think that's why I tend to get along with people who are older than me. But definitely, it's our generation's weird for sure.
It is. And it's like almost where you have a cultural shift because when you were like talking about like having siblings that are millennials, like my siblings are also millennials. My sister actually is almost like, I think, still technically Generation X. Like she was born in 78. So when you have like that much of divide, it kind of also opens up your eyes a little bit to, I guess, the different struggles and things that your own family members, or like you said, like people that are older, they had to go through compared to what you have to go through. So experiencing that kind of opens things up a little bit in understanding.
Totally.
So how has that experience been for you? Because you seem like somebody that likes to culturally diverse with other types of people from different generations, from different social backgrounds, from different places.
Yeah, well, I guess jumping right into it then. um, should we introduce me or are we just jumping right into it?
So kind of the thing with like the podcast, it's basically just conversation based.
Okay.
I don't really believe in introductions. I feel kind of like the best way to get to know people is when you start to spark the interest and fascination,
Okay.
especially like I think also a career and the type of work that you've done is very much like there's so many different ways of going with it. We're talking about people, we're talking about intention, we're talking about intuition. So, yeah, I just like want to be able
Totally.
to explore and figure out where we can go and kind of learn along the way.
Awesome. Well, I'm here for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I would say there's definitely a difference between generations. Like, even all of the memes about boomers, I think it's really interesting to think about the boomers, Gen X. I think there's like Gen Y, I don't know. But our parents, like for Gen Z parents and a little bit millennial parents, they had really interesting upbringings because their parents had survived the Great Depression. And so I think that kind of shaped a lot of the way people viewed the economy, success, what it means to be an American, like what it means for meritocracy, and just the idea of surviving in this very weird world that we live in.
Yeah.
And our parents were very driven towards success. And overall, the idea of having the perfect American family was really shaped around having that high paying job, the house, the white picket fence, the golden retriever. And I think it's interesting for
Classic
our gen
American.
I
Yeah.
know. And it's interesting for our generation because, well, it's like impossible for us to have that because they've made real estate a business instead of a necessity for people. And so many of our parents' generation are profiting off of real estate
100%.
and
You
doing
know what?
so well on it.
You you touched on something that's so true, which is around generational families, particularly when you go from the silent generation to you go on to the boomers. A lot of people experience, particularly even from the boomer generation, where many of these people grew up in the 60s, where mental health was taboo. You didn't talk about mental health, you didn't discuss mental health. So a lot of people, especially now, like millennials, they were raised by parents that had borderline personality disorders. They had narcissistic personality. They had Munchausen's. They had a plethora of diseases that were never checked. So what happens is you have a bunch of people running around like lunatics and maniacs, screaming on top of their lungs. This is what, like, I've especially had conversations with people where politics, medical, generation, all of this can get messy. But when we look at each other, depending if we could be Gen X, Millennial, Gen Z, you name it, like even from the silent generation, just to talk and see
Mhm.
the mistakes and problems that we've done before, and what we're now doing to correct them.
Yeah, but I don't think we're doing a great job
No,
of correcting them
no,
right now. I
no.
think what we're doing right now is trying to repeat old mistakes, which is really just terrifying to watch. But
It is.
yeah,
It
it
is.
is really interesting, the difference between the generations and what you're saying about a lot of our parents having unchecked mental illness. There's definitely some truth to that. I think, I don't like the word narcissism. I think it's thrown around too much. And I think everyone wants to label each other as narcissists and
Right. Yeah,
sociopaths.
yeah, no.
And
I
I
was
think
just bringing
it's,
that up as a
yeah,
point because it's kind of like,
totally.
it's like everybody's talking about like, well, what about, because in short, it's complex, right? These are all very complex things that, especially when you're dealing with psychology and you're talking about mental health and how the mind works, like it goes in so many different directions from case to case, from individual to individual,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. I will say narcissism is a really interesting topic, and I do cover it in my chapter in my book, which I've got right here. I write about individualism, and we have this culture of individualism that I think is really hurting us as a society. And individualism keeps becoming more and more, has more and more of a stronghold over our society, and with the way social media has been shaped and the way that we've shaped our culture around individualism, it's made us become less connected.
Hmm.
And while our parents certainly had mental illness, especially anxiety, I think so many of them had undiagnosed anxiety. Um, I will say that what we can look at with data is that mental illness is getting worse and significantly worse. And the way that a lot of researchers and scientists are able to kind of know that is by suicide rates. And if you look at the suicide rates, they've just skyrocketed starting at about 2007, which is a really interesting time in history because that's when, the housing market crashed and there was this bit of a recession going on. And
It was a
at the
very big
same time,
recession, but yeah.
yeah. And at the same time, that was when the Kardashians launched, when like Snapchat, Instagram, all
YouTube
these
came
different
out.
apps,
Yeah.
yeah, they
Hmm.
started launching around that time. But it's interesting because really up until then, the only predominant social media was Facebook and MySpace, which had
AOL.
still,
Yeah.
barely there, and they weren't the same as they are now. They've
No.
really kind of changed the way they operate because, they used to operate more for social connection and getting people to, chat online and post their weird photos and videos. I'm sure you have a lot of those from childhood. I do.
Yeah.
But now it's all about what profit they can make off of us and how much time they can get us to be on these apps.
When you're talking about this, I think about when I was a child and I had a brother that lived overseas. And I remember as a child where I grew up in upstate New York. I lived about 90 miles outside of this city. We had landlines. Okay. We didn't really have proper internet until about 2006. And if you wanted to call overseas, we had phone cards. You'd call up a number and you get a certain amount of minutes and you'd call out of the country. You were very limited of like the access to people around you. And like to the point where I knew my brother from photos that were mailed to us, like that package that would come in. That's what I was trying to get at earlier is I'm one of those people that grew up in a time where I saw this stuff. I remember when Snapchat came out. I remember like, what is this? Like everybody was like buzzing around, like, what's Snapchat? And to this day, I don't know what the hell Snapchat is. And I'm like 26. I don't use it. I don't know what it is. But like that change you're talking about is so imminent. It's so real. Like you could see somebody in Bulgaria right now on a live on TikTok. Right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, we have a lot of access to information that's just not
Mm-hmm.
normal. But what I will say is like over and over again, so many different researchers and people that have power and influence talk about social media being this big um, cause of the mental health crisis. And it's actually something that I don't completely agree with and talk about in my book because the way I see it is that social
Okay.
media is actually a mirror. It's a mirror to our society's culture. And
Okay.
what's interesting is like if social media was just people posting science videos and like crafting and like how to build stuff and like math, we wouldn't be where we are right now. People would be a lot smarter. They'd be a lot, people wouldn't be on these apps for so long. But the thing is they've really intelligently figured out what are we interested in, what's going to keep our attention, what is going to make them profits off of us. And it's the things that we, like sex, money, celebrity. Those things are what people like. And in turn,
Instant gratification. Yeah.
yeah, and so while I think social media has contributed to maybe this crisis of inattention and these issues with ADHD, I don't think it's contributed to the larger problems of depression and anxiety in the way that people think. I think that they've operated as a mirror of the greater culture that's been happening and shifting since industrialization. And I think that what it's doing is it's holding up a mirror to us of all of the worst things about our humanity, is basically on social media. It's like all the worst parts of us and the best parts too. But it's basically that's how it's operating. And that culture, that's really at the heart of what we need to address. Because if we used our phones and technology as the tools that they are, these amazing tools, we could be just fine. But it's the way that we're using them and the way that we're finding pleasure with them and entertainment with them that's really become a problem. And even if you look at old movies and we look at TV shows from around the time the suicide rate started going up, that was the same culture we're seeing now. It's just we're getting a whole lot more of it.
Yeah. I think, you know what? I'm going to point this out because I come from the community. So I can definitely put an insight on this. As a person that was raised in a somewhat religious cult community, and I also happen to be gay on top of that, and then leaving religion on top of all of that. I know that what has generally happened among us, what we call the OTD community, which is just stands for off the derech, which means off the path. They There's a lot of suicide around those people in particular because when you're raised in a society that tells you you can't be who you want to be, and let me point this out, and I'm not trying to like start any conspiracies. The government is very well aware of what these groups are doing. They're very well aware, and they don't do anything. They just let this stuff happen. And this goes on every single day in New York. So you end up in these situations where you see the amount of people that are suffering mentally. You see the suicide rates and things. And like, you're right. It's not just social media. It's a lot of other things that go on in this country that's causing those numbers to escalate. But I think what I want to touch on this too, what you're talking about individuality, because I think you bring up an excellent point on regards to that. Is where we view individuality as a single blade sword, but in reality, it comes with two blades on each side. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it can be very helpful for us and hurtful. Depends on how and why.
How did you come to how did you how did you come to that conclusion, and how were you able to find the research, and like, was it just like a moment that happened for you? Did you have an experience with somebody that you're just like, huh, there's something to individuality that I need to dig deeper in to figure out what's going on here?
Well, I think that the harm of individuality comes in the way that we treat each other and in the ways we operate as an economy. So a lot of our people that we really look up to, like, I mean, some people look up to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk because they're billionaires. They're not necessarily people I look up to, but they, a lot of people really look up to these billionaires, but they didn't like get to where they are by being nice to people or by helping other people out or they got to where they are because they cut people down, they stole, they lied, they cheated, and then
Hmm.
they became who they are. And so what I would say is that a lot of our businesses and corporations operate with this individualism mindset of what can I make, and then all of these different employees that are struggling and making 1,000 times less than their managers or whatever. So it's
100%.
just there is this issue with how we view each other, especially economically. But
Yeah.
then socially as well, there's definitely this issue of what can this person do for me? And what do I get out of going to this? There's this culture of how is this situation or person going to benefit me? And there's not a lot of how can I benefit these people? How can I do good? How can I be kind? How can I make this world a better place? It's a lot of me happening. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Something, it's hard to hear because you don't want to be able to process these things, but you're so right. I mean, I can even say for myself, when I've recently like started putting myself out there in regards to dating, and when I meet these guys, I literally get the same reaction each time. They're like, you're so open, you're not judgmental, like you're not scared to talk and have a normal conversation, like difference of opinions. And to me, that's just normal. That's just me. I've been like this for years, you know, and I sometimes have to get out of my head and realize that this is not something that's easy for everyone. Not everybody is comfortable being able to be in a relationship where don't get that immediate gratification. You don't get that immediate, like, I want you, I need you, I'm gonna have you now. I I I think that, like, I think you're right. There's a lot of warpage in the way that we socially interact. And I don't want to be one of those people like, let's blame the pandemic. But I was in New York during the pandemic. And I can tell you personally, I feel like it has a lot to do with what we're dealing with right now. It just took a situation that was already starting to topple and break and made it 20,000 times worse. And nobody's like wants to stand there and say, "Hey, we have an issue or problem." It's like everything's normal, everything's great, like we've moved on. I'm like, "Hey, let's slow down over here. It's like only been 5 years. What have we done in 5 years to kind of reciprocate back all of this stuff?" How many businesses, how many artists and individuals that have lost their lives completely because of what happened 5 years ago? And nobody talks about those independent artists. Nobody talks about those underground people that are either dead because of suicide or suffering mentally or no longer care, now working a crummy end to job just to survive. I've spoken to quite a few, and it's sad and it's sickening. It's like somebody's got to talk for them.
Well, I will say I am definitely trying to be the person to talk for them. I lost my
Yeah,
best friend during the pandemic, and so I that was a
I'm
huge
sorry.
motivator for me. Thank you to write this book, and it's probably the strongest motivator, because losing her was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. And I'm now working on a documentary, and trying to push so hard to get the message out there that there is this crisis happening. It's been happening for a long time, but yeah, the pandemic definitely made it worse. And I think the reason why the pandemic made it so bad was because of the loneliness and isolation, which is also another topic I really dive into in my book, is that we are in a
It's so
loneliness
true.
epidemic. Yeah,
It's so
it's
true.
I mean, over half of our generation is lonely. So many of us are lonely. And I think that ties back to how we treat each other, our culture, and because we're really burned out. So many of us are burned out in the way that our economy is structured, because it doesn't matter if we go to college now, it's really difficult to get a job. A lot of us are stuck with student debt. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
if we want to own a home, we probably won't because of the way that housing is nowadays. And
Yeah,
so many of us are struggling with this isolation. And then on top of that, we're struggling with a lot of pollutants and toxins that are really plaguing our system that, again, no one wants to talk about. And then,
no.
of course, we have a president saying, drill, baby, drill, and let's cut down the forests. And, it's like all of these things are happening. And no one's talking about the impact of how these things are really going to affect our mental health.
I what you bring up is also really important because I think a lot of the times we tend to not stick in our backyard, okay? And me strictly, like, I'm very like the type of person where I'm apolitical, but I'm very like libertarian in the sense of where let's stay in our backyard. Okay. Let's stay local. Let's stay in our communities. We live in all sorts of places in this amazing country, and all sorts of states offer different opportunities. And there's a lot of communities doing different things. Like I mentioned, you want to talk about like there's an underground scene in Atlanta. Georgia has a very large music underground scene. You have all of these communities that exist. What we have forgotten is that we have literally stripped ourselves away from zero opportunity to identify as our own, okay? As a country, as a people, and as a society. So you're right. This has been a long, everlasting thing that people have been talking about. We've been talking about in the 1960s. Go on
Yep.
YouTube right now and go through all the documentaries and all the research that was on a mental health and crisis. They're talking about the exact same stuff. It's because we're
Mm-hmm.
so focused on the outside world. All right. When I was in the UK, and I have a friend that lives in the UK, do you know what British people care about? Britain. Britain, because they live in Britain. Do you know how many times you're here in the United States and I'm hearing conversations about countries in the Ukraine and that it is? I'm like, my heart goes out to these people. And if I meet these people, like, I want to talk to you and I want to hear what's going on. But we have other things we got to deal with. We got a mental health crisis that we have to deal with. We have right now a situation where we need to figure out education in this country too. Okay, we talked about the beginning about generations. Do we really want to keep educating kids like this? Because I remember my education as a kid. It was hell. It felt like I was being trained to be a factory worker. Okay. It's taken me years. Now I've like put myself in vocational school where I'm going to be putting myself through a trade to get myself to be independent. They don't teach you any of this stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my God, it explains so well why we have some of the worst mental health anywhere else on this planet. And even though we are a first world country, which is crazy, being a first world country and then also having terrible mental health. What?
Yeah. Well, there's really important things that we need to change in order to help improve
100%.
mental health. And I talk about them in my book. I outline six really important things systemically that we have to change. And then I also talk about different ways that parents and um, educators and lawmakers can also go out and make changes. And then what we can do individually as well. But what I'll say is that I think I think the important thing is that as a nation, we really, what you're saying is true. We need to do better. We really do need to do better educationally. I mean, yeah, that was an important topic that I specifically talk about in terms of creativity. We are in a creativity crisis, and there's this researcher named Dr. Kim who actually studied like 200,000 people and found,
Oh,
you know, since the 1990s, we've just had this decline in creativity. And what you said about like our education just being crap, it really, it was hell. It was crap because they're forcing us to do all this testing and they're not giving us the space to be creative, to learn in ways that aren't necessarily just, you know, like everyone learns differently. We need that
yeah.
creative space to learn. And you know, even California, we have like very, very little funding for the arts, very little funding. And most of our states do not have like any funding for the arts. And we've put so much emphasis on the math and science and like these common core subjects, I think because people really valued the idea of college and like getting kids into college, and it went from, you know, star testing to the SAT and the ACT and all of these different tests. But I mean, if you look at the research, tests really don't show any actual person's capacity to do really good work. It
No,
is not an indicator.
no. And what you're saying is true because my dad was an immigrant to this country. And my dad, he was very much blue collar. He worked in trade and he was very against college. He was, especially when he was alive, he used to always tell me that, like, don't do college. You want to be successful. Do something that you're passionate about, something you're creative, something you could, he used to say, do something with your hands, like a trade. Like, because in the end of the day, if I'm saying this as an artist, if I don't have that creativity flowing, I don't feel alive.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah, well, the arts have been shown repeatedly to have positive outcomes on mental health. They're incredibly important and protective for mental health. And the fact that we've just eliminated them from our school systems and aren't valuing them as a nation, because I mean, we could value it in the workplaces, we can value it in all different spaces, but we don't. And it's harming us. It's one of the things that's harming us.
Yeah, especially where if you take kids, right? You put them in these schools and they have the same curriculum every single day for 8 hours for, I don't know, 12 years or whatever. But why not allow the kids to kind of figure out what classes they want to take instead of forcing them into the exact same classes year after year? I get it. Kids don't always, know how to be able to make their own decisions and stuff, but they're the ones that are spending the 8 hours there.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to be said about what you said about training us to be factory workers. I think that's exactly what schools were designed to do.
Remember
Like
who
I yeah,
remember who set up this education system? The Rockefellers.
there's definitely something to be said about that.
Yeah.
But going off all of that, I think something really important to talk about in terms of mental health is just basic needs being met. And I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think it's a great theory, and it's basically this idea that we have these very basic needs that we need to meet just to have good mental health. And some of those things are just really basic things like clean water, clean air, shelter, food, connection. And so many of us do not get even our basic needs met. And what's interesting and really kind of scary is that, for example, the government lists our poverty threshold at $16,000 a year. But I don't know a single person that could have their basic needs met at $16,000 a year. That's
Yeah, I mean, I live
impossible.
here in South Florida, and realistically, which is crazy, you have to be making like about $50,000
That's
here.
exactly what I write about in my book. So even
Yeah,
for the cheapest apartment studio apartment in Arkansas, you can maybe rent an apartment for about $577, let's say.
right.
You even making 20,000 a year, you wouldn't be making your basic needs. And so the basic minimum to survive would be more like $57,000, which is really now what I argue should be the poverty threshold, because that's really here in America
Yeah.
what you need to make to barely get by.
And you know what? I'm going to be one of those libertarians that is going to throw it out there. A lot of it is due to we don't make a lot of things here. We import more than we export. We just we and okay, here's the craziest thing too, because I come from the automotive side. We do manufacture a lot of parts here in the United States. The issue is that a lot of those parts are not being sold here. They're being exported outside of the US. So what you're left with is, and this is a really great benefit, especially I have an American car where you have now independent businesses will work with aftermarket companies that are based here in the United States that are making things which you can purchase, which is great. There's tons of them. There's American Muscle, there's CJ Pony Parts, there's a couple of other businesses. I love that kind of stuff because it kind of is like, you know what? And I'm being serious. Like, even if I'm on a hard budget, it's like, you know what? For like an extra $50, I'm gonna go with this brand because, like, I know that in a way, and like, I don't know. This is how I feel personally. Being able to support that American company knows that at least like helping somebody else out to be able to survive in this country. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of like my attitude towards it when it comes to things like that.
I mean, it's interesting. I think another important thing to talk about is the idea of AI, because that's
Yeah.
actually going to be replacing a lot of jobs. Right now, I think, I forget the exact number, but I'm pretty sure AI has already replaced like at least a million jobs, a really high number of jobs. And if you think about what that's going to do to our job market, which is already failing so many people are struggling with not being able to get a job. That alone is another thing that is going to have a huge impact that a lot
Hmm.
of people are not talking about and not finding solutions for. So, yeah.
You that's an excellent point, and I can touch on particularly in the automotive industry. What has happened now is the need for technicians that know how to work on electronics is exponential. I mean, there is right now we're close to 78,000 in need. Um and what is happening now is that there's been development using AI and augmentation and virtual reality to help technicians be able to better diagnose vehicles, particularly like any guys that work on cars out there, you know what I'm talking about, where you get those weird leaks or things that are breaking. It allows you to basically like look at a car and look at it as if it's a skeleton. And using artificial intelligence, you're able to literally zoom into specific areas and see exactly what is going on in real time. So you're 100% correct but regards to AI, where it is going to take millions of jobs. But again, like the idea with societies where we need to adapt. In the same way where like the automotive industry, like again, you're talking about the automotive industry needs close to 70,000 people. And on top of that, they need out of that 70,000, most of them knowing how to work on electronics because there's going to come a time where you're going to need that AI and that's going to be implemented to make like, you're not going to need so many people doing the same things. You're going to need one person doing a lot of the same job. Gotta be able to implement in advance. You know what I'm saying? Like getting stuck in a rut or staying in the past, I feel is like one of the reasons why we struggle a lot of the times.
Yeah, we absolutely do need to innovate and come up with solutions. One solution I've been considering is the idea of a tax on these big corporations that are replacing employees with these um, AI bots, because each AI bot essentially replaces an employee, which means that that is making the company so much money that that employee would have made. And it also takes away a person from making that income. And so if that basically each bot is taxed as if they were a person, that would also help kind of at least contribute a bit to the economy. But there's a lot happening that's really scary and happening so quickly too, that
Yeah.
it's hard to even begin to figure out what to do. But there is a lot of ways we can innovate. And one of the things that was really impactful to me in graduate school was this idea of social entrepreneurship, which is this idea of doing business for good. And so it's sort of like a win win situation where entrepreneurs can go out, they can make a business and make their money, but they can also have this business that exists to do good, which means not only is the entrepreneur benefiting, but society is also benefiting.
Yeah. And you know something, you touched on something really true because when you have those entrepreneurs that really think outside of the box and create those really great ideas that can benefit a community. By the way, those can be, for example, they have some local communities where you have like a voluntary center where they're struggling, and they have some members that are really like crafty and really creative, so somebody can figure out a way of like either creating like a website or platform where other people can share and get involved in the community and help out. Somebody was showing me, like, I know this is like from one of the big organizations, like they had where they implemented this game that you could basically like fill up a bowl of rice and it helps give rice to like third world countries and different things. I get what you're saying. Like there are like really great entrepreneurs that can think up of ideas of helping out communities. And there's plenty of people out there that are willing to do it, but you know, like it takes a lot of it like takes a lot of hours. It takes a lot of blood,
Hmm.
sweat, and tears. And sometimes there's not just enough financial support. So, you
Yeah.
know, you're left pulling the money out of your own pockets in order to do those
Hmm.
things.
You're exactly right. That's actually so. I'm working on my next book, and one
Wow.
of the things I'm touching on is social entrepreneurship because I think it's such a pathway towards really positive change. And the thing is that if we want more social entrepreneurs, we've got to support them. We've got to give them the tools and resources to make this accessible. And some of that is just changing legislation because there is some ambiguity in terms of starting up these businesses because a lot of times they operate as nonprofits and as corporations. And
Mhm.
so some of them are benefit corporations, some of them are like I forget the name of it, but like, there's co-ops, there's different things that exist that are kind of like social enterprises. But because there isn't good legal legislation around these things, that there's ambiguity. So even something as simple as making the less ambiguity around what social entrepreneurship is could be a big help. But then again, we also need to help finance these different organizations, and so that
Benefits.
goes
Yeah.
into yeah, exactly. So what you're
By the
saying is
way,
exactly right.
you're I wanted to touch on that. I know that you don't have that much. I don't know if you have that much experience, like particularly with the electronic industry, but the electronic industry also here in the United States. This is one of the reasons why, like, if you had more benefits and things that were implemented in some of these industries, you'd have more and more of these things made here. Like the reason I'm saying this too is it benefits communities as well, right? If you have and I'll give you an example. Like I come from New York, so we have this in, for example, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a lot of free farming. So a lot of these farms live near local areas. So these local communities work coincide with these farms. So what happens is when you sometimes you're driving through PA and you pass there, there's these local farmers selling things. They have like local farmer markets. They have communal events and things because they're all living and working alongside each other. Without one, the other one can't survive. So it's like almost like a mutual share of hand. It's like, hey, we need to survive, and hey, you need to survive. So let's work together to make this possible.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Working together is super important. It's funny you bring up farmers just because I interviewed a farmer for my documentary. And
Really?
yeah, a lot of farmers are not doing well. They're really not doing
They're
well.
not.
And the rate of suicide in farmers is really high. It's like one of the highest industries.
They need
Um,
community. People don't understand this. That's what a lot of
well,
farmers are missing is they've been
oh,
so bought
yeah,
up by Purdue. I'm going to say it.
yeah, yeah.
Purdue and Oscar Mayer and Taylor Farms and whatever the crap you want to call it. Like,
Monsanto. Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah, unfortunately, and the way our government subsidizes these really big, big farms, it's really hurting small farms. And small farms are so important and so incredibly, like, they're feeding us. And this farmer that we interviewed was telling us, he put out, thousands of pounds of almonds to our communities, but he ended up losing money that year. So while everyone's eating and benefiting off of what he grew, all this work he did not make a single dime off of it. And yet all of these companies that ended up with the product, of course, did profit. And so there really comes to question, like, what are we doing to the very people that are feeding us? It's I have so much empathy for farmers after that interview because it's just really, really tough out there.
It is. And I'll tell you, like, as somebody that grew up in New York, the thing that a lot of people do not understand in the city is there are a lot of hardworking people that live in upstate, really hard work. And it's really sad. Like, now they're taking away their homes. They've made it so expensive. Like, going 120 miles outside of the city now can cost like $600,000 for a house. Okay, that was never heard of before. I mean, they've just made the taxes so crazy and expensive. Like, you know what the issue is that like I've noticed this too. It's not even like state government. It's the people that the state government is representing in these places.
Hmm.
Like I live here in Florida, and one thing that's kind of letting me leave here too is like, no offense to DeSantis, the man is business hungry. He doesn't give a
Hmm.
rat's ass about a single individual that lives here, regardless if you're a senior citizen or, I mean, the medical sucks here. I mean, it's crazy expensive. They charge way too much for insurance. It's way too expensive to live here. Like, I get it. Like, there's other parts of Florida, but in the end of the day, you know what? You want to blame the US government? I want to blame the state government here in Florida because all of this that they're doing is completely avoidable, right? This is something like you totally, we see eye to eye on this, is where avoidable situations and completely blindly going in that direction. It's like, do you really think benefiting businesses year on year is going to actually help anybody? I don't. Sorry, large corporation businesses. Let me emphasize. I don't. I don't.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't believe there are very many good politicians out there, and the
Mm-mm.
reason why is because of the way we finance and have people elected to begin with. The way
Politicians should
our
be volunteers. They should not be
Yeah,
employees. That's my personal opinion.
first off, absolutely that, but also you have to raise, like, I mean, even for a small local campaign, like here in my city, I think I was talking to someone in campaigns, and they were telling me, oh, even for a small little local city council election, you've got to raise $50,000 or something like that. That's insane. And no normal, good hearted person is going to necessarily know how to raise that kind of money. And then the other part of that is a lot of times these politicians are funded by these big corporations because
Hmm.
those are the people with the money. And then that in turn influences their decisions because whoever pays them is who they're going to have to listen to.
And look
And
at
so,
Snap.
yeah.
Look at Snap.
Hmm.
I mean, can you imagine the American Heart Association arguing that soft drinks should be a part of the SNAP program? I'm like, listen, I I don't have any words. All right. You have the American Heart Association publicly promoting soft beverages to be a part of like the nutrition package for people that, have difficulty with finances or are not bringing enough money. I'm like, are we seriously having this conversation? What's next, American Heart Association? Are you going to tell us that Chick-fil-A sauces are 100% good for you and you should have them every single day with your breakfast? Like, what? Like, seriously, like, if we're going in that direction, we should go there.
Yeah, well, I mean, literally, the amount of money that goes towards lobbying alone, all of that money alone could help solve a lot of our world problems. That
No.
right there. All of the money that went just into the presidential election this last 2025, that could have gone, all of that money could have gone towards really, really important issues that could have been solved. And yet we funnel insane amounts of money that go into marketing and whatever the hell else it goes into. And it's not really helping. It's just helping us get sociopaths elected. And it's
Yeah.
terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying that we have all these millions of dollars towards that.
It's mind-boggling. No, and you're totally right. I'm very much a realist, and I'm very much the type of person that believes like we have reached a point where we've had to have now where we've a campaign. We've never had this before in human history, where we've had to reach a point as our government that to have some good, we had to get such craziness that comes with a few people in the cabinet that are doing some good changes, like are actually doing something. Because you've had in the past so many people are like, yeah, but nothing's ever done. It's the same bullshit every 4 years. Nixon, Reagan, Bush, Clinton. The list just goes on. It's just bullshit after bullshit after bullshit. It's like finally, after like 50 odd years, it's like we get like maybe like 6 people. Yay. I mean, I'm kind of happy, but it's like, this really how slow progress really is?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, progress really is quite slow, and it is unfortunate. And there's this sociological concept called the pendulum swing, where when good starts to happen, there is this pendulum swing back towards eliminating the progress that has been made. And it's unfortunate, but I do think good is slowly happening. It's just I don't think it'll happen in our lifetimes.
No, this is going to take years. I mean, it's crazy because the last real person, and again, people have to remember, this is how I remember this. Don't think of it as presidency, it's cabinet. Because remember, whoever comes in, they bring a whole slew of people that comes along with them. Like the last person that we had like was JFK. JFK was like the last person, but the problem was like in his own cabinet, he had people that wanted him dead. Guess what? They succeeded. They got him killed. To your point, it's like that pendulum. It's where you can bring in the chaos, because that's what it is. It's chaos. We're going to collapse and break everything along with it. Bring some of the good Trojans, the good Trojan soldiers. But along with the good Trojan soldiers come those not so great, not so great soldiers that just want blood rust, war, chaos, and money.
Yeah.
It's the way of the
Yeah.
world, man. Man, it
Yeah.
sucks.
It does suck. It really does.
But I want to bring this up, and regardless of difference of opinions, I remember growing up in New York when we had the pollution in our water supply. Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, so that's actually, we still have pollution in our water supplies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there was when we were growing up, this is something I wrote about, is that there was lead in at least 70% of school drinking fountains. That was from a Harvard study. They found lead, like unhealthy levels in school drinking fountains, which is directly tied to ADHD, depression, behavioral issues. And that was in just school drinking fountains across the nation. All of these
So
kids drinking lead.
it's crazy and bizarre because I remember as a kid when this stuff started coming out into the open, and they used to play us the videos in school because it got to a point where they literally had ads, "Don't drink tap." Like, there was this thing in New York for a long time where we did not drink tap. We used to just go to Costco. That's what my dad used to do. We just buy cases and cases and cases and cases of water. You know, and keep in mind, like, when my parents had me, they were like, in their like 30, like my mom was already like 40 and my dad was already in his 40s. They lived in New York already for like 20, 30 years. And then now this hits, and they're so terrified that, like, for years, it's like, don't drink tap water. And
Yep.
the government hid this
Hmm.
for years, particularly in New York. Like, they hid it so well. Like, I, they knew what they were doing and they kept going. I mean, it's government, obvious, but it's just
Yeah.
like, wow, wow.
It's terrifying. Well, I mean, I think they also downplay a lot of things that are harming us in our health and our mental health, including pollution. And that's one thing I talk about that people don't think about. Like, whether you're an environmentalist or not, what we are doing to the environment is directly harming our mental health. These oil drilling, coal mining, the toxins from our cars, like nitrous oxide. There's these VOCs. There's issues with just all of these different pollutants, including like things like Febreze. I mean, there's if our detergents. There's so many things that have these harmful chemicals in them that hurt our environment, and they also hurt us, that are really, really severely downplayed.
Yeah.
It was funny. Yesterday I run a therapeutic art program at a high school, and it's
Oh,
wonderful.
wow.
And
It's
the teacher
amazing.
before me, yeah, I love it. It's the best thing ever. But the teacher before me, she in her classroom, which I share with her, she has like a bunch of different Febrezes in the room, and she was telling me, I do this because the room smells so horrible, and it's kind of the only option. And I explained to her, I don't mean to like give you a TED talk right now, but the chemicals, the fragrance in Febreze has endocrine disruptors, and those disruptors, not only do they contribute to obesity, but they also contribute to different mental health struggles like ADHD, depression, anxiety. And so many of these different things that are just everyday normal things that we don't even think about are really, really harming us, including just standing out in the street where all these cars are passing by. And then obviously it's good we have catalytic converters, but it's not enough. There's still so much pollution that
Yeah, well,
happens.
to your point, by the way, regarding catalytic converters, the biggest problem is that the most modern advancement of catalytic converters, which are the less polluters, are usually cars that were made in the past, I think about 5 or 6 years. So pre-pandemic, we're talking about like 2018, 2019. So we have cars that are less polluters. The issue is that you still have people still driving cars that are 20, 25 years old, which, again, they also have catalytic converters. But also, to your point, is you have countries like India and you have countries where China, where they don't take in any account with any of these pollution regulations. So they've got mass polluter cars, they've got coal mines through the wazoo and all of this crap. And it's like, look, I'm one of those. I think we should do nuclear power. Okay.
Yep, I agree with you.
They've done that in France with the small state. They're called stage three nuclear plants. They're very, very small. They're like literally the size of a bus station. I'm dead serious. Like, that's how big they are, and they could power like literally a whole, like two or three of them could power the whole city of Paris. We could do that here. Like, man,
Hmm.
the amount of blackouts people go through in rural areas, like, just make a freak. And they're not going to blow up like here. Like, they're not going to blow up like they did in, like Fukushima. I always mess this crap. The Fukushima? Did I answer that correctly? I
I'm
don't
blanking
remember
on
how
it
to say
now
it.
too, but no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
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 so much
scary. No
cleaner.
one wants a nuclear winter, right? We don't want some crazy explosions, but I think they are relatively rare and there are so many precautions.
Yes.
Um, there are new forms of power coming out. Even solar power, it has its problems, but it's still wind power, solar power. There are better options than what we are doing with oil. And I mean, our oil reserves, we only have so much oil, and then we're going to run out. People don't think about that either, but there's only so much oil we can take from the earth before it's gone. And I don't know the exact number, but I think it's like if we keep going at the rate we are, like we'll be out of oil in the next 50, 60 years.
To your
So it's like,
to
yeah,
your point regarding like we're talking specifically about oil refinement, because the reality is that if you look at even in the car industry, the best type of fuel that they make is so refined, and now they're figuring out, particularly now with electric hybrids. So these are vehicles that use electric motors as well as gasoline motors combined to create power. You know, again, like I was saying this earlier, like people don't understand, like even the automotive industry is moving more to a more hybrid, more electric system. Like
yeah,
that is what our future is. Our future is hybrid and electric. And if you don't like hybrid and electric, I hate to tell you this, you're not going to like our future. That is
yep.
where we're headed. And it's because oil refinement can go as far as it can. Okay? This is
Hmm.
reality. It can go as far as it can before it becomes you can't do anything with it anymore. And
Right.
I mean, why else would you make a C8 Corvette with electric motors and an engine like that? I've seen that vehicle. That thing is freaking crazy. It goes 2.9 seconds, goes 60 miles an hour. It's because, like, the people that work in Chevrolet, those technicians, those engineers realized this is our future if we're going to be making fast cars. Um, and again, like touching on with the environment, you're like having an excellent point. It's we need to move forward in our future. Like we want to be able to build spacecraft outside of our atmosphere, right? We want to figure out different ways of um propulsion and being able to create engines. Like we did this 100 years ago. Let's try something new. Let's advance as a society. Like
Hmm.
I believe in advancement. That's my philosophy.
Well, I believe in advancement too, and I talk all about it in my book, which is called Out of Focus: Why Gen Z's Mental Health Crisis is More Complex Than You Think.
It's a beautiful cover.
And thank you so much. Yeah, I put a lot of heart into this and a lot of time. It took me about a year to write, and I I really hope that if when people hear this, if they hear me, they care about what's happening to young people right now. They care about all of these young adults, all of these people who are struggling with their mental health, that do it in silence, that need help. I think that one of the most important things we can do as a nation is learn more compassion, more empathy, and more kindness for one another. And there's this guy, he's called the kindness guy. You can find him on Instagram. He defines kindness as the act of making someone feel less alone. And I love that definition. I had never heard of it until I had been introduced to him. And why I love that is because so many of us feel alone. So many of us. And that's just half of people that are willing to admit it in a survey. It could be even more. And the thing is that by doing these acts of kindness for people, by making them feel seen, making them feel like they belong, that could be the difference between someone being here and not being here.
Yeah.
And so, what I really, really want people to know is how important it is that we go out in this world, we stop with this me, me, me crap, we start looking at each other as humans, as people. We stop this us versus them, this polarization where we don't view others who have slightly different opinions or maybe very different opinions than us,
Yeah.
but that
That's
we don't
okay.
view them as human. It
Hmm.
becomes such a problem. And so really, really what I want people to feel and to know by listening to me is that we need to do better. We need to be kind.
Yeah. Very much so. And I I can say that when you lose somebody that you love, that's very close to you, that means a lot to you, that leaves a hole inside of you that can never be replaced. And I think it's heroic, and I think it shows a level of self will and courage, being able to push through that. You know, in your case, it's writing. Other people can be music or painting, or making a film. You know, yeah, all sorts of places and connections and avenues. But um, I really think that does define you as an artist. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
my pleasure. Oh, Allie, before I forget, I know you have your book. I know you have social media, and I know you have a website. Where can these wonderful people find you?
They can find me at outofocusbook.com. My Instagram is my name, Aly Vredenburgh, which is hard to spell. So the best thing to do is to find my website, outofocusbook.com, and you can
Okay,
find my website there and my Instagram.
I'm gonna leave your handle and then also your website for anybody that has a hard time spelling, so you can be able to find Allie's work and incredible book. Because I mean, hello, I mean we've talked for an hour, and again, regardless of differences and stuff, it's like we all gotta, like you said, get out of that me. It's like in order to survive, we have to be able to have intelligent conversations. We have to be able to be open and communicate because in the end of the day, like I think we have more in common than we have not in common.
I agree with that. And I think the important thing is that at the end of the day, we all find love and care for everybody because we all do matter and we should feel like we belong.
100%. Thank you so much, Ali, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. To anybody out there, if you want to check out more of the pod, you can find us at Lost in the Groove Pod everywhere and anywhere you listen to the pod. All right. Catch you next week. Peace out.